Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, as of this moment, despite huge pressure and expectation from all sides, the British government still remains silent, utterly silent, whether or not Surrender Starmer raised the issue of Jagtar Singh Johal with Narendra Modi last week. We look at the protest against Modi that met his arrival and indeed the person who led that protest, officially labelled as a terrorist by India. Makes quite interesting reading. In India, unsurprisingly, according to the Godi media, the so-called mastermind behind the Pahalgam attack was an ex-elite soldier of the Pakistan army. Well, we look at their evidence. Meanwhile, in the US, another Kirpan story hits the headlines. This time it's a medical student. And we continue our look at AI, and this time how it uses audience manipulation to increase its power and reach. All this and more on today's show, but joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning, viewers out there. Thanks again for your comments and sticking around to the end of the show to see if yours makes the cut on the show. Of course, we've also been getting our Critics Corner back, and we're always excited because, do you know what? Everybody has an opinion, and sometimes they differ from ours, or the perception of facts may be different, and all of that. So yeah, keep your comments coming, good, bad, or ugly. We love them all. But thanks again for tuning in, and back to you, Angus.
Indeed we do, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world, and indeed at the end of the show we'll take a look at loads of great comments, so thank you for those. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, once again, we're hearing about the Pahalgam attacks, and this time they are making an identification of an individual that they had put out a reward for and have reportedly killed, along with two other alleged terrorists. Now, the question here is the timing. It was just a week and a half to 2 weeks ago that the Indian government was being questioned about the legitimacy of their claims in terms of the version of facts that led up to this event or that took place. Now, of course, we know that the attacks took place. We know that many lives were lost, which is totally wrong. But the questions that were coming out was, if they were so clear on the facts, why did they not yet have someone in custody? Or why had they not taken other actions? And I'm sure most people know what India does when they say they take other actions. They either disappear or end up in a shallow grave. Now, the mastermind that has been identified is Salman Shah. Now, that is apparently just an AKA, or otherwise known as, and they say his real name was Hashim Musa, and that he was an ex-commando of the Pak army and part of an elite unit. Now, they had, as I said, released an information and a broadcast to be looking for this individual, and it turns out that the encounter near Srinagar, along with the two terrorists that he was with, they were found and they were executed at that time, and we don't know a whole lot about the actual event. Now, we don't know if there was a shootout or whatnot in terms of the information coming out to verify. The other question that I have is why it's coming out strictly in the India media and why it hasn't reached the mainstream media, which means that there may not be a verification of the sources and the actual information in itself. So is this actually the leader of the attack, or is this going to be another just, person that has been sacrificed to be able to put the opposition back on their heels to stop questioning Modi, the BJP, and of course the security and India Army? Now, as I said, this individual is alleged to be a part of what's known as the Lashkar-e-Taiba, and that's a terrorist organization, also known as the LET. He's a former commando of the Pakistan Army's elite unit, the Special Services Group, also known as the SSG. He later joined the UN-designated terrorist Hafiz Saeed's LET to carry out terror activities. Now, this is, again, coming from the NDTV. They are citing sources, but again, they're not naming sources, and that is typical in news journalism because you want to protect protect those who give you information. But in all honesty, it is also a way that they get around accountability in terms of the facts that are being reported without actually identifying the sources or where the information comes from for people to be able to verify it. So again, it's questionable that way. And that is one of the concerns of balancing journalism with the truth. And, we know that the ethics rules that we would typically follow, or that I know I follow in being a member of many journalism organizations around the world, I know that those kind of policies and ethics are not necessarily as strictly adhered to within the India media and journalism field. And of course, a lot of the journalists and the media outlets in India are controlled by the BJP or the RSS. So again, we are taking the report at face value, but at the same time questioning the validity and honesty of the reporting. Now, the joint operation of the Army, the CRPF, and the Jammu and Kashmir Police Operation, Mahadev, was launched early this morning to track, corner, and hunt down the terrorists. So they are claiming that within one morning, they launched this operation, they found the individuals, and they subsequently executed the individuals is what it comes down to. And yet this is coming in months after the attacks happened, and we are left wondering, why did it take so long to launch an operation to track them down and to bring them to justice? That is another big question for the different media in the Western world to start asking questions for. Now, the police, of course, after the Pahalgam attack, had announced that there was a 20 lakh rupee reward for anyone providing information about Suleiman. But again, they launched this operation this morning. They located him, and again, they were executed. Now, they claim that he had infiltrated India in September of 2023 and started terror operations in South Kashmir. In October 2024, he led an attack in which several civilians were killed when terrorists opened fire on a camp housing workers of a private company who were building a tunnel. So again, if they had all of this information going back to September 2023, why did they not act sooner and take a preventative action to bring him into custody, or to at least have closer watch on him where he could not have been involved, or at least they could have intervened before the major Pahalgam attacks happened? So again, this is being reported by NDTV, so we don't know how much of it is real and how much of it is the media machine coming out of New Delhi. But again, this is what's being reported at this hour in India for that, Angus.
Yes, it's. If you take the whole story at face value, and let's believe the Godi media. Yes, we do know that there are Islamic militants who operate and have operated in J&K. There are some very bad people out there. There is absolutely no question that at the extremist end of the Islamic community, there are people who do some very bad things. We've seen it right across the West. And likewise, I've no doubt that they have operated in J&K. I don't think we can deny that. The real question here, though, is the Pahalgam attack specifically. Was it perpetrated by Islamic terrorists? Was it perpetrated just by Islamic extremists, or just militant fighters? I mean, again, it's a very grey area. It just comes down to what is your definition of a freedom fighter and a terrorist. It's that age-old debate. But ultimately, what happened was unforgivable. It was a terrible act. I think 26 innocent people lost their lives. It was an appalling act, whoever perpetrated behind it. Now, the real question here is, in reality, is the Indian media, the Godi media, telling us the truth? Well, unfortunately, we just have to look at the track record of the Godi media, and it is very likely that they are not telling the truth. The Godi media always presents a very tightly controlled narrative. It is a narrative that always benefits, of course, the BJP government, and it never is held accountable. It never really gives a truly balanced version of events. So everything that comes out of the Gaudy media, we have to, by default, unfortunately, just disbelieve unless we can corroborate it elsewhere. And here's a prime example. There's absolutely no corroboration of this story anywhere, certainly not from any other independent media. Now, certainly, I would say the right-wing Hindutva social media is full of this story. All the usual suspects are actually sending some pretty awful, I have to say, very explicit photos of this girl. Some of the so-called accused who have been shot dead by police. And as I say, they're pretty explicit photographs. They've been killed in some sort of form of law enforcement action, allegedly. But again, you've only got these pictures and the story behind them to go by. There's no actual confirmation, corroboration. They could be old pictures from, who knows, it could be from the battle in Afghanistan for all we know. We just don't know for sure. So again, it all comes down to, well, what actually is the truth here? And unfortunately, as we do know, when we start to sort of take a step back, it's always better to take several steps back from stories like this and try and look at, okay, what is the likelihood, the probability? Let's look at the track record, what's happened in the past. And so many people right across social media have commented, look, there are so many holes in this story. J&K has over 500,000 Indian troops operating there. They keep a ring of steel of security around J&K. It is a highly popular tourist area, as sadly was experienced here. So how on earth did 3 gunmen manage to sneak in fully armed into this area, murder these people, and then slip away? Again, it's not impossible. It does happen, but it raises so many eyebrows. How on earth did these men manage to penetrate this so-called ring of steel and then slip away into the night, never to be seen again? Until conveniently now. Again, likewise, it's rather convenient, again, that they are dead. Dead men tell no tales, as they say. So again, there's no trial, there's no actual cross-examination, there's no independent examination or interrogation of these people. Were you involved? Were you guilty? Or in fact, were you just actually innocent targets who were rather conveniently being found and shot dead and then labelled as terrorists for this one particular attack? So yeah, unfortunately, to me, James, it's very, very hard to take the story at face value. It could be true, who knows? Unfortunately, it is just impossible for anybody outside of India to really get the truth, because the narrative itself is so tightly controlled, and of course access to everything that is happening on the ground, again, is tightly controlled. So once again, unfortunately for India, all it does is just recreate once again this whole air of what is the truth, what actually is really going on here, and suspicion and all the usual cynicism and suspicion. It just feeds global suspicion of India, James.
Absolutely, and we'll have to watch the mainstream media and any other reports coming out by human rights groups and see if we can find any mention of this outside of the Hindutva media. And we'll be watching. We'll be sure to report on it if we do. But in the meantime, we're talking a lot about the media. And again, we are talking about AI tonight because we've been looking at a series here throughout the week. So last night, tonight, and then for the rest of the weekend, it'll slowly progress to a wrap up on, of course, Thursday. And right tonight, we're going to take a look at a medium level propaganda that's generated by use of AI. Now, of course, last night we looked at what I like to call a progressionary stage, and that is where they start out with these benign stories or just these generalized stories, and then they'll move across the spectrum as they start to draw in a mass amount of viewers, because at this point, it is a narrative that is more neutral. Now, tonight, you'll see where we take a step from last night, just talking generalized about AI and how it can be used for good or for bad. And then tonight, we're going to take another step forward. And by the end of the series, you'll see how it progresses. And that's how these media sources are drawing in not just young crowds, but crowds of all different ages. And in some ways, the older audience that should know better are less suspicious of it than the younger generation, because the younger generation is questioning a lot of the media. Not only that, they are a lot more tech savvy when it comes to understanding that AI can be made to be very, very realistic. Whereas we're a bit older, we're a bit more seasoned, and we like to believe that what we see is the truth. So let's take a look here, and I'll just bring up a report that, again, you'll get to listen to, and then we'll get into talking about it for a few minutes afterwards. But again, it is just showing how they progress. And again, these are originals, so these are not taken from elsewhere. These are AI created that I work on. So again, they're not being copied from someone else. It's just for this story purposes here. So again, just so we're clear on that, and everybody understands how the AI works, hopefully by the end of the week, and how it's sucking people in.
Welcome to The Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today we're looking at a real paradox. How does a place like Punjab, India's breadbasket, feeding millions, also carry these deep scars of conflict and these unresolved questions? Our deep dive today is unpacking a new report, looking squarely at Punjab's future and tackling this exact issue.
Yeah, our goal here is to explore this idea of a middle ground. So moving beyond just secession versus keeping things exactly as they are. Could that kind of approach actually unlock, real peace, real prosperity for Punjab? We'll get into why some historical issues just won't go away and what a constitutional path to more autonomy might actually involve.
All right, let's really get into those historical roots, because the call for Khalistan, for an independent Sikh homeland, it wasn't monolithic. Not at all. It really came from some profound grievances. I mean, think about the trauma of the 1947 partition. It just ripped Sikh communities apart, left sacred sites over in Pakistan. Huge trauma. Then you had the 1966 state reorganization. People felt it was diluted, didn't really resolve key things like Changar's status or, critically, who controls the river waters.
And the Green Revolution, that often comes up.
Absolutely. It's that classic double-edged sword, isn't it? On one hand, yes, incredible prosperity, amazing crop yields, India fed itself. But the flip side was massive wealth disparity. It really benefited the large landowners, those with capital, with access. Smaller farmers got left behind. Debt, falling water tables. It created real agrarian distress. And significantly, this large group of educated young people with no jobs, they became, fertile ground for discontent.
Okay, so these long-standing issues are simmering. Then the report digs into the 1984 events. How did those shift things?
Oh, profoundly. The report highlights how Operation Blue Star, the army entering the Golden Temple, and then the horrific anti-Sikh pogroms that followed across India. I mean, this wasn't just random violence, reports suggest. It was often state-condoned. It created this incredibly deep, searing alienation. It wasn't just about the immediate pain, though that was immense. It fundamentally radicalized a generation inside Punjab. And it also really galvanized the Sikh diaspora worldwide. They became crucial hubs for support, for advocacy, really changed the dynamic.
That context is vital. Now, the Anandpur Sahib resolution from 1973. It often gets labeled, as purely secessionist. Does the report agree?
That's one of the most interesting takeaways, actually. The report argues pretty strongly that despite how it's often portrayed, especially by the central government, it was fundamentally a federalist document at its core. It was calling for a really radical devolution of power, asking for the center's role to be limited mainly to things like defense, foreign affairs, communications, currency. Most other powers, including residuary ones, would go to the states. So it was a push for significant autonomy within India, not necessarily breaking away.
Okay, so if we take that rereading of history and the ongoing issues, how does the report suggest moving forward? What's this middle ground in practice?
Well, it points towards a constitutionally guaranteed setup. Enhanced regional autonomy, but firmly within the Indian Union. And it suggests leveraging India's own existing concept of asymmetrical federalism. India already does this, right? Article 371 gives special provisions to various states, maybe for cultural protection or specific development boards. It's not a one-size-fits-all system.
So there are precedents within India itself. What about looking outwards? International models?
Yeah, absolutely. The report draws parallels. Think of Scotland, with its devolved parliament handling most domestic affairs, or Quebec in Canada, which has a distinct status, more control over things like language and immigration, even Northern Ireland coming out of decades of conflict. Their power-sharing agreement, while complex, offers lessons in building trust after deep division. So for Punjab, this could mean real legislative power over key state issues, agriculture, definitely water management, plus more fiscal independence, and, crucially, constitutional guarantees protecting Punjabi language and heritage.
And the potential upside, the peace dividend, as they call it.
It could be huge. The report paints a picture of political stability really attracting investment, both domestic and foreign. Think manufacturing, agro-processing, creating jobs, those desperately needed jobs for young people, maybe reversing that brain drain, where talent leaves the state. And then there's the agricultural potential. Could this stability allow Punjab to finally move beyond the current, often unsustainable model towards like a second green revolution, diversification, value-added crops, processing? It could be transformative and maybe, just maybe, start healing some of those communal fractures. It could even shift the role of the global diaspora, right?
Yeah.
From maybe being seen as agitators to becoming key partners in investment and development.
Makes sense, but it sounds, well, challenging. What are the roadblocks the report flags?
Oh, for sure. You'd have spoilers, right? Hardline factions on, frankly, both sides who might see their influence diminish in a compromise. And you always have to consider geopolitical factors, external players potentially trying to stir things up. But the report is clear. Like Northern Ireland, this isn't a quick fix. It's a long game. It requires sustained political will, a serious effort at building trust, and just keeping the dialogue going, even when it's tough.
So looking at Punjab through this lens of constitutional federalism, rather than just, say, a security issue, it really does seem to open up a different kind of pathway maybe towards both peace and prosperity. It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? For you listening, what concrete steps, small or large, do you think could actually start building that trust? How do you sustain dialogue when you have such deep historical grievances involved? Something to ponder.
So again, something to ponder. But as you see, from last night to tonight, I've taken what they would utilize within the different machines that are out there to try and spread propaganda and to convince people of a different mindset. So last night, as I said, we started with a very benign story. Tonight, what we're doing is we take the AI to the next step where we want to draw people in and really we're trying to change in terms of the AI here and looking at it. So we're trying to change the mind of why a sovereign Punjab or Khalistan would be a bad idea. We want to transition people to that thought process from being supporters of the Khalistan referendum and the sovereignty. So again, this is just for story purposes and for people to understand how that works. So today in this report, of course, they are quoting a so-called report that brings all of these points to light. And that is to draw in the comfort of the Sikhs who are in favor of Khalistan, and that gets them watching the show. Now, this is going to be something that draws in a lot of people. Now, where it differs, though, or where the next progression would be, is that they want to start targeting the people who are less committed, who may be on the fence about supporting it. And that's where the next stage would come in. And again, it's not over a 4-day period like we're doing on the show to basically educate and raise awareness for you. But it's a longer game that they play, and they actually are able to get into people's minds and really change the opinions of those who may not have been more steadfast one way or the other. Now, as I said, this alleged report that they kept quoting in this report that the DJs or the announcers were talking about is a report that is, wrong file. A report that is not actually existent. It is just a fake report, again, that's created in terms of trying to push a narrative and bring people forward. So here's a 29-page report, and it is very much about looking at a middle ground, a negotiation between the two sides to find that way that it can actually work for both sides without giving full sovereignty. Now, great. It's a nice 29-page report. It's got a lot of great information. but it's not a real report. It just really looks good in terms of pushing the narrative and fooling the audience that we're catering to. And again, drawing them in, feeling a bit more safe, a bit more comfortable, a bit more emotionally attached, because we're talking about things like 1947 partition. We're talking about the genocides of the 1980s, especially 1984. And so again, it's all relatable events to try and push the audience to feel more of a personal connection, and therefore a bit more ownership and openness to the ideas that are being presented down the road. And again, it's all about that false narrative, Angus. At the end of the day, how they draw you in, use these false AI algorithms to create reports that you can influence one way or the other. So no matter how you want to present them, you can make them look really good and sound really good. Again, those are AI voices. They are not real announcers. They are AI, but they sound like a professional, well-situated radio station or talk show. So again, that just shows you the complexity of people trying to disseminate reality from AI, Angus.
Yes, I find it very interesting, actually. And there is, I would say, a very generational difference in terms of, as you pointed to, how people treat material that they see online on whatever medium you happen to be watching or listening to. And those of a certain generation, I'd say the older generations, are used to being brought up with a very small number of television channels and the state media and the news broadcast that you would listen to, and you would believe everything that you were told because you had an inherent trust in your government, in your state broadcaster. It was almost drilled into you, indoctrinated from a young age that, you know, the government is there to look after you, rightly or wrongly. But ultimately, the older generations tend to believe everything they see and hear through the media because that's the way that they've been brought up. There were very, very small number of outlets, news outlets in the early days of media. And you tended to rely on them because, of course, they were a lot more accountable in those days. However, fast forward to the 21st century, there's 1 million plus outlets of every different hue, colour, variety, agenda, narrative, you name it. I mean, you can literally almost find any opinion out there that exists because everybody has a differing opinion. And which one do you believe? Well, and as you rightly said, James, people, certainly the younger generation, that have this natural cynicism, this natural suspicion of everything that they see and hear. Their first question in their head is this real? Is it credible? Can I believe what I'm hearing or seeing? Which is great. And actually, I even notice in the schools, certainly here in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in North America, part of the educational programs, kids are now being taught to be tech savvy. They are being taught to question, taught to be suspicious, be always highly suspicious, be alert to obviously scams, but also be alert to misinformation, to being indoctrinated or to being manipulated. Again, it's a great thing. It's wonderful actually that the young now are being taught to be so much more careful online and so much more tech savvy, as we call it. So that in itself is actually very encouraging. As you say, James, it's people of our age who unfortunately are brought up to sort of be a little bit more, a bit more sort of naive in many respects. We believe what we're told. I mean, we fortunately are a bit more cynical, but the average person of our age and certainly generations older than us, yeah, as I say, they are more vulnerable to this. And but as you say, the question is, well, how credible is the source that we watch or listen to? And it's fascinating listening to this AI-generated audio because it is so utterly realistic. I get approached on a daily basis, literally, to provide my voice to help train these models. And I refuse every time. I don't want to put myself out of a job. But I am approached daily by these developers of AI models saying, you know, we want your voice. We're constantly improving. There is this iterative process to constantly improve the AI voices so that they become more and more believable. And you listen to those. I mean, the detail involved in it, as a voice artist, I was listening to the technical details of that AI voice, and it's all there. You've got the breathing. The breathing's very realistic. It is in the right places. The intonations are right. The nuances are pretty much all there. And even the female, I mean, I was laughing actually because for those in the US, there's something called the vocal fry. Even she's got this vocal fry, and once you notice it, you can't stop noticing. It's actually a very annoying affectation. And for those of you in the US who've ever watched a program called Loudermilk, and I do urge our audience, if you ever watch Loudermilk, it's a comedy series, and there's one very famous sketch where he calls out this female in a cafe for her vocal fry, and he's saying, "Why are you talking like that? It's an affectation." It is. It's an affectation, and it's really annoying. But anyway, but that is this sort of level of detail that is entering these, which make them all the more believable. It's fascinating, but it's also terrifying all at the same time, James. So yeah, it is no wonder. And I would say just one final point. Referring to something you referred to. General elections, democratic elections, are usually won by the middle ground. It's whoever persuades those in the middle. On either side of the political spectrum, people are usually well entrenched in their views. They're not going to change their minds, no matter what they see or hear leading up to an election. It is those in the middle who are slightly wavering. It's the wavering voters in the middle who think, who should I vote for? I voted for them last time, maybe I should give them this again. It's that block, that demographic, that is always the real target of the political strategists. They know that it is that block, that wavering block, that determines elections. And that is where AI really has a dangerous impact, because it can be targeted deliberately at that wavering voter. And again, it's through gentle, subtle manipulation. It's sucking them in. It's slowly influencing and manipulating them into one side of that argument. And that's why AI can be so dangerous. Because it doesn't take an awful lot to tip that balance of opinion for that central group, that election determining group. And that's the real danger, James.
Absolutely it is, Angus. And as we progress over the next two shows, people will get a clear idea as to how it can be used to manipulate both sides, and especially focusing on that center ground. So again, hopefully the audience enjoys this and learns something from it. And by all means, when you're watching, put some comments down below. We'd love to know what you think as the audience, or if you've heard and called out AI in your experience online as well. So let us know. Indeed.
I'm going to move on to my first story now. And I did talk yesterday about Narendra Modi's visit to the UK last week for a very quick visit to meet our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. And of course, there was huge expectations right across the political spectrum, particularly among Sikh organisations, that there would be the issue of Jagtar Singh Johal raised, amongst other big issues relevant to the Sikh community. And we've been waiting for an announcement. And there's this huge expectation that there will be an announcement from the UK government saying, yes, we have raised it, and yes, we are making robust steps towards the release of Jagtar Singh Johal. No, as of this moment, as of going to print, so to speak, there is absolute radio silence from the British government. I'm not surprised. The only surprise I've got is that the Sikh organisations who are waiting for an announcement are surprised themselves that there is no announcement. Of course there's no announcement. What do you expect? Do you honestly think Starmer was going to actually stand up to Narendra Modi and demand that his government release Jagtar Singh Johal? Well, as I say, I would love to be corrected. I stand and wait to be corrected, but and as I said yesterday, I predict any statement that does come out, if indeed one ever does, will be an anodyne, meaningless statement, lots of words, but no actual concrete evidence that there is genuine steps to releasing Jagtar Singh Johal, other than we are raising it with the Indian government, etc. So, you know the story. It's just become just a farce. It's just another highlight of how failing the British government is over Sikh issues. Anyway, I wanted just to look at this the Modi visit from a slightly different angle, actually, because I was delighted to see Sikhs for Justice. Actually, they have made hay on this one. The English phrase "made hay while the sun shines." Indeed, when Modi visited England, he visited Prime Minister Starmer at his official residence. It's called Chequers House, which is just outside London in the countryside. And I think it's very telling that Starmer met Modi not at number 10 Downing Street in London, where the whole the huge Sikh diaspora could converge and really give Modi a hard time, and all the protesters could really give him a hard time. No, he took it outside of London, just northwest out in the countryside. Chequers, a very secure country estate, the official residence of the Prime Minister. But of course, again, it's very hard to get people up there to protest, and very hard hard for them to get anywhere near Narendra Modi. In fact, I dare say Narendra Modi probably never saw one single protester, because that's the way that the British dealt with the whole affair. But indeed, Sikhs for Justice were very happy to highlight the fact that there was a protest. Well done to these guys. And let me just quickly play. This is a video just sort of shared online by Sikhs for Justice. It's small but effective.
Indian government. Who kill a ninja? 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 Indian government. Who kill a khanda? 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 Indian government. Who kill a ninja? Indian government. Who kill a ninja? Indian government. Who kill a ninja? Indian government. Who kill a ninja?
And on it goes. And so basically the chant is, who killed Najjar? The Indian government. Who killed Kandar? The Indian government. So again, it was all well, I would say, well predictable stuff and marvellous stuff, and well done to all of those who did make the huge effort to turn up and fly the wonderful Khalistan flag and be heard and be seen. Again, it's all about getting out there and being seen, getting across social media, getting these things out there, getting the Khalistan flag out there and getting the community out there and being seen and highlighting the issues that are so important. So, but what I did find interesting actually, and the reason I wanted to just have a slightly different angle on this story, is that it does highlight yet another typical Indian tactic. That protest was led by a guy called Paramjit Singh Pamar. Now, I don't know Paramjit, I've not met him, but he's I would say a very influential activist. He's been very active, obviously, in the pro-Khalistan movement and the anti-Modi, anti-Brahmanical control of India. He's done a huge amount of work to stand up for the Sikh community and try and fight back against this dreadful persecution of the community. And he said, I mean, he made a few quotes. As he said, he was part of the leadership of this small but effective demonstration. And he said, India's Modi will face Khalsa justice, not diplomatic immunity, not backdoor deals, but direct accountability. Actually, I beg your pardon, that was Gurpatant Singh Pannu's comment, his quote. What Paramjit did say was that free trade agreements with Modi's assassination regime are nothing but free terror pacts, giving diplomatic cover to India's transnational kill operations targeting Khalistan referendum activists, etc., etc. So, I mean, again, very, very active. But what I found particularly interesting, this guy, Paramjit Singh Pamar, his story, I find a very interesting story. His story is very typical of the Khalistani activist that operates globally. And it's, again, it just highlights the nonsense that India comes out with. Now, he is quite a well-known Khalistani activist. He's been, a lot of this information comes from Wikipedia, and you've got to be obviously very slightly skeptical about what appears in Wikipedia, and it always comes with a bit of a narrative, bit of an agenda. But if you pick apart the actual facts, I find it very interesting. He is obviously originally from the Punjab. And he was brought up during this terrible time in the 80s and 90s when the Indian state were just literally murdering in cold blood Sikhs. They were just taking Sikhs out into the countryside and torturing them and killing them in these so-called fake encounters. So he was brought up in this context, in this environment, this social environment where his friends and family members were being murdered literally around him. And he joined, as a result, the Khalistan Tiger Force, and as a result he became on the India's NIA most wanted list. So he's really wanted by India. They really do want to get their hands on him. He, as I say, is originally from the Punjab, and at the time in the early 90s, India claims that he was involved in fairly low-level crimes up until the early 90s. So they claim, and I don't know if this is true, that he was a small-time criminal, let's say. But he left India in 1994, went to Pakistan, and he started fundraising over the border for Baba Khalsa International. That's a pro-Khalistan organisation. Now, he joined the Khalistan Tiger Force and became closer to its chief, Jagtar Singh Tara. He then took charge of the militant-related activities in Thailand, so again operating internationally. Again, he had to do this to escape the clutches of the Indian state. And he also, from there, provided support and infrastructure to militants in the Punjab and across the region. But in the year 2000, he came to the UK and he actually sought political asylum. This is, again, I think this is more about the factual truth of the matter. He claimed political asylum on the grounds of mistreatment by Indian authorities, who he claimed had previously tortured him for his political views and he brought his family across the UK. Now that is totally believable, and there is no way the British state would have allowed him into this country and granted him political asylum if there was no doubt. If they felt there was doubt about his claim, he wouldn't have been allowed in. So very clearly the British government or the British border force have investigated his claims, and he's managed to substantiate the fact that he and his family were under genuine threat of life from the Indian state. Now, according to India, in 2009, Punjab police announced they wanted him for supposedly masterminding the murder of Ruldar Singh. He was the head of the the Rashtriya Sikh Sangat, while still in the United Kingdom. So they claim that he was assisting, masterminding this murder of this head of the Rashtriya Sikh Sangat. Who is the Rashtriya Sikh Sangat? They are the Sikh affiliated group, the organisation affiliated to the Indian RSS. Why on earth a Sikh group of Sikhs would want to ally themselves with the RSS just frankly baffles me, knowing what I know about the RSS. But that is their choice. But ultimately their leader, Ruldar Singh, was murdered, and they're claiming that Pama was behind it. He was also accused in the following year of being connected to bomb explosions that went off in Patiala and Ambala. And a year after that, the UK authorities found evidence lacking after a joint investigation with Indian authorities, and he was allowed to remain in the UK. So what happened here is that India made all these claims. They made approaches to the UK government, the UK law enforcement, and said, look, this guy is a terrorist. He murdered this guy. He murdered this leader of the RSS, who was behind some bombings in Patiala and Punjab. And the Indian government and Indian law enforcement worked with British law enforcement to investigate this, and UK law enforcement threw it out. They said, no, there is no evidence. Unfortunately, you have not provided sufficient evidence to say this guy has any connection to this. In other words, once again, and it has echoes of what India has done in Canada and trying to bring Canadian Khalistanis to justice, as they say, claiming they're terrorists. Again, same thing. Canadian investigators investigated it, full-on investigations. No evidence. Sorry, your evidence just does not stand up. They're lies. It's concocted. It's fabricated. Now, Interpol issued a red corner notice, as they call it, for the arrest of Pamar in 2012 after a request from India. Now, it turns out in 2015, 3 years later, he was on holiday with his family in Portugal. He was detained by Portugal police, acting as they had to by this Interpol notice. So they said, oh, there's an Interpol notice, we need to detain you. And they held him. Now, the UK members of Parliament, including actually Jeremy Corbyn and the then Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond, who was a Conservative, said, look, we are battling on his behalf, but we can't do anything about it, but it's up to the Portuguese courts. However, Portugal did release him in February 2016. This is just about a couple of months later, so it's about 8 weeks later. They had to release him because the Portuguese Minister for Justice intervened himself. So a Portuguese politician came and said, there is no evidence. This evidence is nonsense. And as a result, Interpol also removed his arrest warrant from its files shortly afterwards, saying the data registered in Interpol's files concerning Mr. Singh was not in compliance with Interpol's rules. So basically, if you look between the lines of this guy who's basically living in fear in the UK, he's had to flee the Punjab because he's a Khalistani campaigner. He's ended up in the UK, and India has tried consistently to claim he's a terrorist. They still claim he is a terrorist. They have presented their so-called evidence to the UK. The UK has investigated it, as has Portugal, as has Interpol, and each of those three entities have said, no, this evidence does not stack up. This guy is clearly not a terrorist. So once again, James, here we are again. Well done to Paramjit, I have to say, for organising this. Well done for all his activist campaigns. He is not a terrorist. It is once again highlighting the fact this agenda coming from India, this false agenda, this narrative, this fake narrative that the Khalistanis are terrorists. Sorry, it never stands up in court. It never stands up to the full lens of examination. It's fake, it's rubbish, it's nonsense coming from India, and it just highlights once again this agenda coming from India. They are terrified of the Khalistan movement, James.
Absolutely. And you hit the hammer on, or the nail on the head there, Angus, when you called out that it's the same bull crap that we hear when they're making accusations against Canadians, against Americans, against British individuals who have spoken out against the BJP, against the RSS, against Modi. And again, they call them terrorists, and they try to pin all of these so-called executions on them. And yet there is no evidence to create any type of support by legitimate law enforcement agencies in those related countries. So again, we just call it as we see it, Angus.
Indeed. And I mean, reading between the lines, I suspect back in the 90s he probably was involved in militant activity. Who wouldn't be, having suffered the dreadful criminal activity of the Indian state? I mean, of course, it was all in self-defense. They had no choice. Literally, they were fighting for their lives, these young Sikh men in the time. But it's evolved from that, and clearly he's fled the area, literally fleeing for his life. And he's lived an activist life since then. He's been very actively campaigning. You can't operate in the UK as a terrorist. You just can't do it. You will be found out, you will be arrested, and you will be charged and detained. That's what happens here in the UK. And yet he is a free man despite India's best efforts. And there are so many activists, so many pro-Khalistan activists out there across the West in the diaspora who are doing exactly what Paramjit is doing. And they are being claimed as to being terrorists. No, they're not. They're called democratic campaigners. That's what it all is. It's just democratic campaigning. Anyway, let's move on, James, to my second story. And this is just a quick one. Here we go again, the Kirpan story. And we talked about the Kirpan in so many different contexts. And yet another story has come out. And again, well done to the Sikh coalition in the United States. They have campaigned once again on behalf, this time, for an Amritdhari Sikh who's a medical student. He's a first-year medical student. Now, this has actually been reported quite widely. But it doesn't say anywhere. It doesn't actually say who this guy was or which medical university he went to in the States. I suspect probably just to protect his personal details. But the story has come out that there is this 22-year-old first-year medical student who started at university, started at medical college, medical school, and when he first arrived on campus to begin his orientation, security officers actually stopped him and said, no, you can't wear your Kirpan. You can't attend any meetings or classes unless he actually left his Kirpan with them during his time on campus. So again, they've just done their job as they saw fit. But ultimately, here we go again. It's all about security, uneducated, unaware of the articles of faith of a typical Sikh, particularly an Amritdhari Sikh. And the Sikh coalition, fortunately, as always in these cases, stepped in. They provided this young lad with resources about the Kirpan to share with university officials. It was all done very politely, very amicably, very officially and very nicely, I have to say, as it should be. But it's all about educating the security forces. Look, you're doing a great job, but what you need to understand is this is not an offensive weapon. It is an article of faith, and Amritdhari Sikhs are allowed under US law and indeed all law across the West to wear this article of faith. So, as a result of the work that the Sikh coalition did, and a formal demand letter went to the various authorities and conversations with attorneys who got involved, he is now in full accommodation to maintain his Kirpan while on campus. So again, it's a great resolution as always. And the Sikh Coalition Legal Director did make a statement. No one, let alone a compassionate student seeking to serve others through a career in the field of medicine, should face a choice between their studies and their faith. And the Sikh Coalition will always stand ready to fight for the rights of Sikhs to maintain all aspects of their faith, and especially the Kirpans. Now, of course, over the last 20 years or more, the Sikh Coalition has worked with all sorts of public and private bodies across the US to maintain this ability, this legal right to wear the Kirpan. And it's included government bodies, public schools, universities, sports stadiums, hospitals, major corporations, public transportation. We've certainly reported a few of those stories in retail establishments, etc., etc. And one by one, all these organisations have been educated and are now allowing this ability to wear the Kirpan as an article of faith. And it's now, fortunately, only rare occasions now that Sikhs have been mistakenly arrested and charged under anti-weapons statutes for carrying their Kirpans. We're getting there, James, slowly but surely. It is, as we say, it's just a long, slow educational process to make sure that all these organisations, all these bodies, all these entities become aware of what Amrit Dari Sikhs do, what they represent, and the Kirpan is just simple an article of faith.
Absolutely. And I mean, this young individual is going to higher education and dedicating himself as Sikhs do. Their strong belief and part of the foundation of Sikhi is seva, the service of others. And that is where he wants to take his entire life. And it's good to see that he was able to teach them and that it was done in an amicable way and that there was still a respect there, that he is able to hopefully feel comfortable going back to classes now and not feel any animosity either way towards the school or the school towards him.
Indeed. So let's hope these Kirpan stories become more and more rare as more and more people become aware of what it's all about. Right, James, let's move on to our comment section. And loads of comments. Thank you to our wonderful audience for all your contributions, which have been numerous, so much appreciated. We start off today with Simply Elite, who, we're talking about the pooling thing going on in the Punjab. Simply Elite says, it depends on who has funded the housing. Something tells me that it isn't the people of Punjab who funded this. Find the source. In other words, it's all about follow the money. Yes, this is about the acquisition, and this is really rumbling on now. More and more stories are coming out in the Punjab that there is basically a land grab going on, is that huge areas of the Punjab are now being bought up by, various people, various bodies, for what reason? What nefarious reasons? As Simply Elite says, follow the money. And it is concerning. Land is so valuable, not just as a resource, but it is valuable. They who own the land, clearly own the sovereignty by default, James.
Absolutely. And tomorrow night we'll actually be taking a look at that. There are a lot of protests that are actually growing when it comes to fighting off this land grab program, or land pooling as the government calls it. We'll take a look at that in more depth tomorrow night on the protests and the reasons why people are against it. Indeed.
And Pritam Korman, this is quite a sad sort of statement, really. Pritam Korman talks about around the Golden Temple, the Harmandir Sahib, or the Darbar Sahib, is that homeless children seem to have been sort of brought in almost deliberately, these child beggars, just to really just bring down the overall environment, the social environment of the region. It's very, very suspicious what is going on. Frankly, I wouldn't put it past the Indian state. But what Pritam also goes on to say is that the police also found some Sikh children who'd vanished from the Punjab, but taken to other states. They've been beaten and put on the streets and told to beg. And even the fact that one Sikh police officer recognised one of his children as his own son, who'd vanished 5 years ago. And the story came out that he'd been kidnapped, he'd been starved and forced to forget his parents and forced into begging. Clearly some fairly terrible figures got involved in this poor child's life. And so again, the whole story there, James, it really is, I would say, quite concerning about this underbelly of Indian society, just what is going on there. As I say, there's so much in Indian society that goes on just beneath the surface that is so terrible. And again, this is a nation that has a space program. So huge amounts of resources, billions of dollars, gets poured into space programs. And yet, in Indian society, we have this dreadful, deep, ingrained poverty. It's just shameful.
Absolutely. And when you look at, again, we can look at the trade deals going on throughout the world when it comes to working with Modi and the India government, and they're not taking steps to try and give pressure on the government to make further inroads to food security programs, human rights programs, and, child safety programs, Angus.
Indeed. And Stay Safe reminds us, Starmer's facing a ban from Sikh events in the UK over failure to follow through with promised inquiry. Yeah, this reminds us, actually, there is a deadline for Surrender Starmer to announce his investigation into the British government's involvement in Operation Blue Star in 1984. And he's been given a deadline by the Sikh community here in the UK. If you want to ever get involved in any Sikh event, if you want to be invited, or any of your party to be invited to any Sikh event or be allowed onto Sikh soil, so to speak, then you have to announce it by the end of July, I think the deadline was. Well, we're nearly there now and still no announcement. So I think the Labour government are going to find themselves rather unwelcome in a few days on any Sikh soil, James.
Well, if there was ever a time to bring Jaggy home, now would be it, to pull one of the Trump stunts and misdirect and hope people forget about other promises.
Indeed.
So, we'll see what happens.
Well, there it is, Mr. Starmer. There's your big opportunity to make amends and win back the trust and faith of the Sikh community here in the UK. You know what you need to do. I'm not holding my breath. Let me check says, oh yeah, it's a raw operator. Those who use Lashkar-e-Taiba, that militant Islamic group, up front to defame Pakistan. Yep, here we go again, James. It is the Indian RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, the Indian intelligence. Are they blaming these extremist militant Islamists for all this bad that's going on in J&K? Yeah, clearly they are.
Absolutely. It's just the same story, different book.
Indeed. And likewise, M. Verdi follows the same theme, really. The Bishnoi gang, these proxy killers, really are just the front end, the sharp end of, you follow the money up the chain. It's Amit Shah and, of course, the great godfather himself, the great Modi, as you point out.
Absolutely.
Satoshi Trapper. This made me chuckle. Why do you use a Punjabi accent to say Sikhs, but then continue the rest of your news in an English accent? Well, I'm English. Also, it's Panjab, not Punjab. Say it correctly like the other dude from Vancouver, James, says it. Well, you get it right, James. I don't, apparently.
I didn't realize I did, Angus.
Well, all I would say, we have this debate on a fairly regular basis. Is it Sikhs or is it Sikhs? Here in the UK, we call our community Sikhs. In North America, it's Sikhs. It appears maybe in the Punjab or the Panjab, it's Sikhs. But is it Panjab or Punjab? Well, we have, again, this debate. It depends where you're from. It depends on your pronunciations. Hopefully our audience know what we mean, James.
And to me, it's Punjab, right? I'm pronouncing the U, not an A.
Well, he seems to think that you, the dude from Vancouver, get it right. So you just carry on what you're doing, James.
Perfect.
Minda Singh says, I like your programme. Well, thank you for your compliment. As a third-generation Sikh born outside India, I'm now able to understand how India's treating Sikhs and other minorities. Your programme has also helped my friends, non-Sikhs, understand what India's capable of doing. Thank you for this comment. My heart was warmed actually reading this, because this really confirms really what we're about, James. This is really what we are trying to do. First of all, we're trying to educate those in the Sikh community who might not actually be aware of what's going on in India against their fellow Sikhs in India. But I would almost say more importantly, is we're trying to bring in those outside the community, to educate those outside the community. Look, this is what's happening to the Sikh community in our own societies. They are a minority who've worked so hard for so long, not just to highlight the fact of what's going on, but also just to build their basic lives against a deep, entrenched persecution against their people, against their community from this Indian state. So we are here to educate and just hopefully try and get more and more people aligned and on side about what, firstly, the Sikh community have suffered, what they're about, what their issues are, and most importantly, is to align them with the whole concept of Khalistan, saying, look, the real answer, there is only one solution to this. TC, of course, follows up this, saying there is only one solution. It has to be Khalistan. It is only in Khalistan where the Sikh people can operate freely, can operate without fear of practicing their faith and just practicing everything that they stand for, James.
Absolutely. And let's be honest that Angus and I are both on a journey of exploration and education as well ourselves. As we learn more and understand it, what we want to do is bring the truth to the masses and to be able to be a bridge between those of the Sikh heritage and religion and those of the non-Sikh community, to try and build an understanding and appreciation for each other in a deeper way than what it has in the past. But at the end of the day, also to make sure that we raise the signal and the alarms about the human rights atrocities against Sikhs, against Muslims, against Dalits, and everybody else in India as well. So we're just trying to bring the truth. We do on occasion get it wrong, and we look to our audience to correct us when we do. So thank you for all the comments.
And indeed, and actually I think your point about what India's capable of is really important, because people just almost wouldn't believe that a country like India, that has this sort of almost fake perception from people in the West, who sort of see it as this lovely benign land of the gurus, land of of yoga and etc. But in fact, that country, its government, and particularly the Brahmanical elite rulers, what they have done historically and what they are continuing to do is just almost unbelievable in its scope and its scale, and the evil behind it is just shocking. And it is our job just to try and get people, particularly outside the Sikh community, who might not just believe that it could happen, that it is happening, it has happened, and it continues to happen. So that is our job, and hopefully we are doing the right job about it. And hello, Timbuktu says that you are impressed by our analytical insight and comprehension of all things Sikhi, the oppression and geopolitics of that part of the world. Well, yeah, it really just reiterates that point, James. This is why we're here. We are on this, as you say, this learning journey. We've learned so much about what is going on, and what we are trying to do is just regurgitate that, is almost educate people out there who, like us, didn't know this was going on, and join us in this journey of astonishing revelation about what actually has been going on out there.
That's right.
And to Charanjit Atwal, I like this one. Proud of you both, best reporters. What I particularly like about that, James, is 2 Singhs, 2 lions. I mean, what a great compliment that is, to be called a Singh, a lion.
Those are much better looking than the AI generated ones of us.
Indeed, so thank you, Charanjit, for that. We will bear those Singh emojis with pride. And my Google finishes off with saying, thank you for your support to the Sikhs. Please keep up the good work you're doing. Well, we can only keep up this good work if you keep with us, if you stay loyal. And many of you, thank you so much for staying with us. Thank you for all your contributions. We couldn't, as I keep saying, we couldn't do this without you guys out there watching us, contributing, giving us these comments, feeding us the stories that we need to report on, feeding us leads on things that we need to research and talk about, because we likewise need to check on these things, corroborate them, and get them out there to our wider audience. Because as I say, we're trying to get more and more people to know what on earth is going on in India, what's happening in the Punjab, what's happening also in the diaspora, about how India's reach is stretching out into the diaspora and literally threatening the lives and livelihoods of those in the Sikh diaspora in the West. So please get out there, spread the word, get more and more people. We know we're shadow banned, so it's up to you guys out there to get more people aware that we are here, that we exist, and we're trying to do this job. So again, much of it is down to you guys. So thank you for all your good work that you're doing. James and I really appreciate, don't we, James?
We certainly do, yes.
Indeed. So, but on that note, we must bring Perspectives to a close for another day. But thank you indeed for all your comments. Do keep them coming, as you have been. And as I say, do let us know if there's anything you'd like us to talk about. Let us know your opinions and perspectives on things that we do talk about. And don't forget, you can message us directly at message@subtletytv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention directly. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.